I mean, I might have it, but I don't.
Folks,
I don't
welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. We're live here in Napa Valley. The oral history of Napa Valley continues with two incredible people that I'm honored to connect with today. Jay Heminway, Pam, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you.
Pam, can you just talk about why you care so much about this land? What the acreage that you own means to you?
Well, it's beautiful. It's off the beaten track. It's different every season, unlike Southern California, where I lived for a long time. It is...
How is it different?
Well, weather-wise, for one. People-wise, for other. And it's nice to be doing something, like having a winery and doing something in the country than just, getting sunburn.
Have you always been into... Can you talk about the first time you connected with Jay and like in terms of from the wine point of view?
I really didn't drink wine till I came here. I drank martinis. And I still drink martinis, but now I love wine, and I know about it, and I help doing the tastings. Jay and I, in the beginning, did a lot of this work together, but I don't do much anymore. I do the office.
Can you talk about, in your mind, the most significant thing you've done with Green and Red Vineyard?
I've written a book about it.
Can you talk about the book?
Not yet.
Oh, it hasn't been published yet.
No, it's via the animals that were here and living here, and it's a whole story of coming here and living here, and a lot of people like it. So I'm in the process of trying to publish it, but it's really fun to do.
Do you think maybe you'll just self-publish it?
Yeah, I do probably. And I've been an artist, forever, but that was a really fun thing to do. Lots of illustrations.
Jay, let me bring you into the conversation here. I wanted to ask you about your time, if you could talk to the audience about the time that you were sculpting and doing live performance, even if it was just one time, how you multi-mix the arts when you were on the Fulbright scholarship in Europe.
Well, I was in northern Italy and near the city of Milan, so I went to La Scala just simply enjoying a whole different part of the music venue, which was thrilling. Being up in the upper floors of La Scala, listening to opera, having people cheering, very different.
In terms of moving out here, though, you only wanted to sculpt. It was only when somebody told you that the land was fertile that you realized that you could grow grapes here. You were just going to come out here to do your sculpting work.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but at the same time, just moving out of the city was part of the impetus, and doing sculpture was something I kind of more or less kind of put aside when I moved here.
Can you explain when you got that transition from the passion of sculpting? I mean manic. I mean a Fulbright scholarship to wine. How did you fall in love with wine?
I think it happened. Always been interested in wine ever since. Spent a year in France and worked in Chateau Lascombe, and then sold wine in New York City. And
let me ask you though, can you talk about the caves in Italy and France? They're not man-made like the one you have. They're natural.
Well, for the most part.
Can you describe the first cave you were in, the first natural cave that you were in?
Actually, I don't think I've ever been in a cave in Italy or
Really?
France.
Wow.
They're actually underground, where they're dug into the earth, buildings on top of, but they're not bored caves into a hillside.
Right. But can you talk about that transition of when you got hooked on wine? Was it just the horticulture component to it? Was it also the culture of that?
I was always very impressed by how wine was made, and particularly on a small scale in northern Italy. And I loved the integration of being indoors, making wine, the chemistry of it, the grape growing, the agricultural side of it. That to me was very exciting, and to watch it. It takes a long time to take a grapevine to a bottle of wine. So it was a wonder to me.
Talking to Jay Heminway here, and Pam, his wonderful wife, here at the Red and Green.
Green and red.
Green and red. Pam, green and red. Let me ask you a question, Pam. What are you still passionate about that drives you? I mean, is there still a story to be told with green and red?
I hope so.
And what should that, when people 50 years from now are watching this, and we are all, I mean, where I'm at, I don't know, but I mean, what is the legacy here? Because to me, this is inspiring stuff. I mean, people can't see, we can't take them through the cave, we can't take them into the gardens, we can't go to the barbecue. I mean, this is a beautiful thing that's done with taste, and I applaud it. So what would you say to people that are 50 years down the road going to be listening? That would you say to them about the legacy?
One of the legacy is it's a place that has a place with secret mushrooms, and they're good ones, and nobody knows where they're.
Secret mushrooms.
Yes.
Wait.
Magical, not the kind that it's the kind you eat.
Of course. But I mean, have you stumbled upon them, or?
It has all sorts of things like that. It has a one place where there are mushrooms. It has all sorts of places. There's meadows. There's lots of Indian things that you stumble over. It's just got an incredible vibe, I guess you could say.
Pam, before I know you have a dinner to make. I wanted to ask you though, how has just the wine culture changed, in your opinion, from the time that you started becoming fascinated to today?
Well, when we first moved here, there were how many wineries, Jay?
Very few,
Maybe
less than 20.
Less than 20 wineries in Napa Valley,
and
that was
now-
1972. Is that right?
Yeah. I moved here in 80, but even in 80, it was very different.
Yeah.
But it didn't have big corporations,
Can you talk about the
Probably,
impact when you step back and the human people, the real people lose control? That it's just that corporate mindset. How does it detract from cultivation of land and just sort of what's your take on the corporate takeover of this land?
Well, it's not families anymore, for one. A lot of them are managers. Well, I mean, it just isn't the same. It's not.
Yeah, there's always been corporations, and corporations are good and bad, and the popularity has grown, but now there's a ton of small semi-family.
Anthony Trouchard told me that the critics are the problem. He said that for a long time, and you can talk to this because your first vintage was 1977.
Yeah.
He said that for a long time, all you relied on was taste and how it looked. You didn't have to worry about making it fancy this or this. You know, these. He said the critics have come in and made it a boutique thing, and it's driving him crazy. He just wants to go back to that gut feel. Can you talk about that gut feeling, or did you have growers, or were you the one going in and making that gut call about when the grape was ready?
Oh, there's always that. I mean, that's the most important. One of the most important things is timing of harvest and the style with which you want to make the wine. But all that comes from the location of where you are and what this piece of land will give you. I don't have anything bad against the critics. They're just out there making their own living. They're just, but they definitely set a standard of, hierarchy that I think is a little unfair, and I don't know. I just don't particularly care for it. It's.
Can you explain that hierarchy wasn't there when you got here? I mean, I know there were barely any food critics. One of the cats that lives down. I can't remember his name. Very famous wine guy. He was the first food and wine critic in San Francisco in '74. But what do you mean by the hierarchy? This kind of, I mean, everybody, if they have fertile land, they can grow good grapes.
I think what I mean by hierarchy is that there's a scoring. There's a chart where they score it between 0 and 100. And when I first came here, I didn't have the intention that I was going to make a world-class wine. I was going to make a good wine. I was going to make and not necessarily an ordinary wine, but I was going to make a good wine. And now it's like I've got to make a world-class wine in order to be understood as being serious. And everything's based on a scoring thing, which puts it into a different arena as far as I'm concerned.
What would be your advice to startup wineries? What about blind taste tests? I mean, what are some of your advice to younger creative cats who are stuck in this paradigm that we're in, and they want to branch off? What would be your advice to them?
Well, I'd say go very slowly, and
what does that mean?
Don't make a lot of wine, and to begin with, and pick your site, and rely on the site of where the grapes are coming from, and try to honor that specificity of the site relative to the varietal you're dealing with at that site.
I mean, that's Pam. Has videology always been a passion of yours? When did you start drinking wine?
When I came here, I know, in Boston, actually.
Boston. Oh, I went to Boston University. Great, my alma mater.
So did my brother. I went once. My grandfather.
There was a place called the Psychedelic Garage there that Michael Bloomfield played at a lot. A lot of Buddy Miles used to play there.
Michael Bloomfield for the mayor of.
Well, from Electric Flag.
Oh, Electric Flag.
Yeah. Pam, go ahead.
Well, my grandfather.
But was it jug wine? Like, what kind of wine was it?
No, it was French wine.
French wine.
And it was. I don't think it was Italian. I think it was mostly French, and it was. And he worked with a guy who bought wine, and I can't remember his name. I remember my grandfather's name, and he had wine with him. We tasted it, and once I went to some great uncle in Boston, and the butler came out with this wine, and my aunt from a mile down the table said, "Arthur, let the children have the good wine," because he was so furious with these kids having wine that it was actually had saved very nicely, and he thought he could get away with it.
Would they put water in it, or just give it to you straight?
No, we had it, but we weren't children then. We were all in college up there. We were children to them. They were that old, but I really remembered the taste of that wine, and so.
What did it taste like?
Well, I call it like my grandfather's wine, but it was had, you know, when I ever say it tastes like that, I think the wine was probably what, Burgundy?
Yeah,
Probably
yeah,
a Burgundy.
Yeah.
It tastes like Burgundy. I didn't
Jay,
know.
the French Renaissance, like 76, was that something that they said all the land, and I talked to Bob Bialy about this, but in like 76 they said it's all going to Burgundy and Bordeaux, and like when you started your vineyard, what kind of grapes were you, I mean, have you always bucked the pop trend is what I'm trying to say?
To the contrary, actually, instead of planting Cabernet, we've been planting Zinfandel, which is,
Zen.
yeah, Zinfandel is,
Talk about Zen. Talk about because I mean, you know, sometimes push back against. Sometimes it gets a bad rap. Here I am in this crown of creation, and you're growing Zinfandel. But talk about those. Talk about that.
well, it was a wine that has a historic presence in this part of the world, particularly Napa, and
In the Western world,
in the Western world, right?
not in Europe.
It originated in Europe, but it definitely has a stronghold in the United States, which is far greater than anywhere in Europe, from Puglia to Yugoslavia.
I'm going to get a glass of it.
All right, Pam.
And anyway, I tasted some great Zinfandels that it compared with some Cabernets at the time, back in the 68 vintage, and I thought they were on an equal par, and I liked the flavor of them better, and planted Zinfandel. Kind of going against the grain.
One of my sponsors is the Desert Heart Foundation in Tucson. I wanted to ask you about. There was a study by the Institute of Health in the early 70s, and they did a whole study of Framingham, Massachusetts, and the top 5 causes of heart attacks. The third one down was abstinence from alcohol. National Institute of Health said we have to bury that, right? They didn't want to be able to publicize that you should be drinking alcohol. But there was abstinence. It was early 70s. Can you talk about moderate wine consumption with meals as it relates to heart health, and if you agree with that?
Well, I've always thought that wine went with meals better than about anything else, just flavor-wise, accompaniment-wise, and I think my ticker's still doing pretty good, and I think there's they talk about the Mediterranean diet as having high in anthocyanins, and that's always good for your heart. So that's I don't have proof of that, but I'm certainly not going to steer away from it.
I'm going to give you a glass of this wine.
Yeah, let me take some of this. Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Here's the bottle.
Explain the significance of this to the audience.
Of the bottle, that's for Jay to explain. I'm going to go cook dinner now.
Pam, thank you.
You're welcome.
Green and red refers to the soils, chert, and a vein of serpentine, a small vein of serpentine running through the property. Chert, sedimentary rock, centuries old. Centuries, millenniums old.
Millenniums.
Millenniums. And this little disc here in the center, kind of a bullseye of sorts, is depicting a Homeric hymn whereby Dionysius, captured by Tyrrhenian pirates, is captured to be ransomed on a foreign shore. To prove his royalty side,
Wow.
crew members, a grapevine, a hull fills with wine, grapevine grows up the mast, crew members are in astonishment and fear, dive overboard, turned into dolphins, and that captured my fancy. And that's the centerfold of the label.
Can you talk about the lineage of cultivating wine in Napa Valley since you moved here?
Well, it was, we did it all by hand back then, and now it's gotten very expensive, and we're using different forms of irrigation. Back then, we watered, from a truck with buckets of water, and when it first got started. Nowadays, we're using drip irrigation,
right,
and overhead sprinklers for frost protection.
Why does that hurt do you think that hurts the cultivation?
No, I think particularly with global warming, use all the technology you can to keep the vines healthy,
sure,
and alive, and water is a scarcity here, as it is in other places, but grapevines certainly benefit from at least having a little drink of water, which is so wonderfully able to be regulated by drip irrigation, and can't imagine growing a grape without it.
Can you talk? Were you familiar with the French paradox study, Professor Renaud?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that how did you feel about that? Because that was the first time that it was really publicized on 60 Minutes.
Well, I think it you're talking about the French paradox with winning of the.
Well, the idea that they smoke more, they don't exercise, and they don't have heart attacks.
No, I'm all for that. I mean, the French have always eaten a lot of fatty foods and drunk a lot of wine.
Did you eat a lot of that food?
Oh, I do. I love foie gras, even though that's not particularly.
I love it.
Positive, but wine, with the acidic background and so forth, it really complements not just fatty foods, but also very kind of saline foods, such as oysters and some seafoods.
Interesting. I mean, did you have you talk about the commercial viability of your wine? Meaning, like, where have you done wholesale before, or do you sell selectively? Can you explain the types of people that you sell your wine to?
Well, we sell our wine to anyone, but for the most part, where we love to have our wine be is in restaurants, and from the restaurants it spills over to retail. We're in about 28 states. We're in a few foreign countries, and we're lucky to have that distribution source.
What were some of the first restaurants in San Francisco or Oakland or Sonoma that were like, yeah, we want this wine?
Well, we have been the house wine at Chez Panisse in Berkeley for several decades, and that's been very positive. They make wonderful food. They're really they were on the very beginning edge of California cuisine, which is and wanted to have a product that was more indigenous to California, and because they saw Zinfandel as representing that, we were lucky to fill that slot. Many thanks to.
Was it just about filling a slot? I mean, it seems like you wanted to go for the gold. I mean, everything here speaks to. I mean, I mean, you have an internal burn like no other. Where does that come from? I mean, did your mom and did you resemble one of your parents more than the other, or?
I don't know about that, but they all did like wine.
They was it during Prohibition days?
No, they well, actually, they grew up during Prohibition.
Yeah, they did, right?
Yeah, absolutely, they did, and they would frequent certain restaurants that were almost like speakeasies in a way, I think.
That's where Thelonious Monk and those guys. I mean, all those guys were playing those places. That's where jazz came to be. But can you talk about what you knew, what you gleaned from them about what the culture of wine meant during Prohibition days?
They didn't talk about it that much. I just watched the documentary about Prohibition, and it was such a political thing that I know it influenced them. My parents were just basically they were not. They didn't embody or embrace,
people want you to look
say.
People want you to look into the camera.
They didn't embrace the cultural
Component of it.
component of Prohibition. That was never a part of them. They were definitely.
What did they not agree with about it?
They saw it as a social amenity, and it became something of theirs that was not separate from their social lives, and I can't really speak exactly for it, but
I guess more to the point
it
is
was not a religious thing, and they didn't have grievances about, and they were very moderate in their consumption. In that and I think the grief at the time, Prohibition really took hold when there was like excessive abuse of alcohol.
right.
And without that particular element, then alcohol was just fine.
What can you say about the Bialy family? When did you get connected with them?
Well, I've known Bob for a while, and great family. They've been here for a long, long time.
How did you meet Bob?
Through an organization called ZAP, actually.
ZAPP?
ZAP.
Just one P.
One P, right. Zinfandel Advocates and Producers. Bob has been a great proponent of Zinfandel, Old Vine Zinfandel, and we feel like camaraderie based on that kind of stand that we've taken with Zinfandel in this county of Napa.
Can you talk about the stand you're taking to the layperson who might be watching in Arkansas or Nebraska, or maybe even a place that buys wine like Florida or New York? I mean, can you talk about the stand that you guys are taking?
Well, I think we're devotees of Zinfandel. We love Zinfandel. We see it as a great variety, and from an economic point of view, based on land values and taxation, a lot of people don't see it as a realizable variety. The price for Cabernet is probably double that of what it is for Zinfandel in terms of fresh grapes, and so most people say you're out of your mind to be growing Zinfandel. It's economically a loser. So, but I think
You'll play the game.
Right. And Bob certainly has. He's proven that equation wrong.
If there's one thing about Bob that you admire, what is it?
His tenacity, his love of Zinfandel, and the fact that he's just pursued it with such a love and a historical background that reflects his family as well.
If someone's going to throw on some Ornette Coleman tonight or John Coltrane, what's the best wine to go with that?
I would say multiple wines.
Which ones would you recommend?
I would have a little of everything, to tell you the truth. No, I would start with one and move to another, depending on the tempo.
You were a follower of Mahesh Yogi?
For a short period of time, I meditated. Yes.
I guess more to the point, how did that help you evolve as a human being?
It made an attempt to slow me down and focus. Not sure it worked, but I gave it a shot.
Before I let you go, what are your plans for the vineyard?
Green and red. Well, I'd love to see.
I get no. Here's more. Are you able to? How is the transition going to a winemaker? Like, what is your major role now at the vineyards?
Well, I manage everything. I'm here every day, and I have a great assistant, Mike Penn, who is associate winemaker, doing a large part of the work, if not certainly at harvest time, bottling time. We all shoulder in, but I'm here when we're doing tastings all the time jointly, and I'm pretty much in an administrative position right now, but I certainly love harvest. Harvest to me is the epitome, the denouement of the season.
Can you break down the during the harvest time the things that get you off the most?
Well, it's been a progression from the start of the vines growing. As you can see out here, they're just budding out. Now they're barely budding out, and to manage them and care for them during the growing season, which can be adverse and not adverse, but and to watch the grapes mature to the perfection you're looking for is quite a challenge. So at harvest time, it's basically the end of a season that reflects that particular year, and it's an opportunity to let those grapes shine.
Jay Heminway, it's been an honor to connect with you, man. I look forward to further collaborating with you, and we'll do it again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
See you all later.